The green covering of plant life across the earth is the matrix from which all creatures, including human life, is supported. Plants sustain us with breath and sustenance. Throughout human history, we have understood that being close to nature, the rivers, the ponds, the streams, the mountains, the lakes, being able to live in balance with it has enhanced our well-being. Using nature, the herbs, the plants, the nuts and seeds, the grains, the legumes and pulses, the tubers, fruits, different berries, the herbs. A plant-based diet was a primary way of helping to prevent disease or help treat disease if you were sick. When we look throughout history, we will find that over a period of many millennia, people at different times lived longer lives and at other times shorter lives. Why? Why is it today, with all that we have and all that we know, we still are not increasing our lifespan and the quality of that life? What are the primary causes of disease? We're still acting as if we don't know the cause. Yes, we do. But standing between the truth, what causes a disease, and hence our ability to prevent it, are special interests. We're making hundreds of billions of dollars a year by providing us with the very elements that then increase our opportunity for obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, plus the pollution within our environment. Join us now in our journey to health and wellness.
The standard American diet is a major problem. It's not only about the fats and calories, but consists of a concoction of various other chemicals of which we don't have any idea of the effects on the human body. The preservative that's in the food, the dyes, the colors, how the food is prepared. The effects on the human body often are unknown. We see patients coming in with not only disease like diabetes or heart disease, they come in with various other weird health conditions, autoimmune conditions. There are many patients that have conditions that we don't have diagnoses for in the medical literature. It really is the underlying problem related to the health crisis that we have in the United States.
In children, we're starting with obesity and diabetes. Midlife, people are diagnosed with high blood pressure. We have patients who are in their 30s and 40s who are being diagnosed with cancer now. We have such high rates of autism and ADHD, dementia, Alzheimer's disease. This is all diet related.
The diet that we celebrate as normal is actually killing us. When you realize that we now do have the knowledge to have a truly intelligent diet that could make us healthy and could reduce the terrible environmental damage that comes from beef farming and the farming of animals, then this silence about the way in which our diet is actually destroying us is a demonic silence and really needs to be addressed at the deepest level.
Our American diet has been influenced for decades, many decades, by people who have a vested interest in making a profit and who are not presenting the American people with sound nutritional information. And that's where we have gone wrong. And what this has led to over decades of misinformation is a standard American diet that is very high in animal protein, high in animal fats, high in saturated fats, with all of the consequences that that kind of diet brings.
A disease that was really rarely identified at the turn of the beginning of the 19th century is now the leading killer of women and men in Western civilization. All experts would seem to agree that where cardiovascular disease or heart disease has its inception is with the injury to what I would refer to as the guardian or the life jacket of our blood vessels. We all have a single layer of cells. These are delicate cells that line the inside of our arteries. It's called the endothelium. What is so profoundly important about that cellular matrix is that they manufacture a molecule of gas, nitric oxide. So here we have this marvelous carpet of endothelial cells. If you were to spread these out, you could cover 8 tennis courts. Nitric oxide keeps the cellular elements in our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon rather than Velcro, which is terribly important. Nitric oxide is the strongest dilator of blood vessels that we have in the body. Nitric oxide will also inhibit the development of inflammation, which will prevent you from getting high blood pressure or hypertension.
Within hours of eating animal fat, our arteries get paralyzed. We nearly cut their ability to open normally in half. The lining of our whole vascular tree gets inflamed, stiffened, crippled from just one meal. And just as things start to calm down, 5 or 6 hours later, we may whack our arteries with another load of meat, eggs, or dairy for lunch, such that most of our lives we're stuck in this chronic low-grade inflammation danger zone, which may set us up for inflammatory diseases, so kind of one meal at a time.
High blood pressure, probably the number one dietary risk factor for death the world over, is a disease that can be prevented.
There are certain foods and drinks that people consume every single day that they think are normal that are actually poisoning our bodies. So first of all, looking at animal products, whether you're a child or an adult, you're just setting the stage every meal for illness. And it's not all genetics. When I went to medical school, I learned your genetics determines what you get. My genetics say that I have lupus. I should have been dead by now. So either someone else is going to be diabetes or it's going to be cancer. But the only way those genes are actually activated is when we set the stage for illness by creating inflammation in our bodies.
What seems to happen in response to the typical American diet, our muscle cells become increasingly filled with what we call intramyocellular lipid, so that as we increase the amount of lipid and fat in our muscle cells, it is increasingly difficult for the insulin to say we turn the lock in the key and escort the glucose into the cell. But what is so profound in many of our heart patients who are diabetic, as soon as they start eating this type of nutrition, they begin losing weight, and the weight often will come out of the fat, out of the muscle cells, and suddenly, once again, insulin becomes very effective, and they are no longer insulin resistant.
I had kidney failure at 16. I had a mini stroke in medical school, and I was told that I'd probably be handicapped by my 30s. I'll be 39 next week, and I'm vibrantly healthy, no sign of disease for 10 years now because I changed my diet.
There's a lot of evidence that shows that when people are placed on a plant-based diet, they have lower rates of chronic illnesses, such as the big ones: diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and heart disease.
Some of the most convincing scientific evidence is population studies that show a correlation of increased consumption of dairy products associating with increased osteoporosis. There's also population studies that show increased consumption of dairy products being associated with increased prevalence of prostate cancer. These are two chronic illnesses that plague us in the United States, and it's been shown to be associated with consumption of dairy products. Many of them inflammatory conditions ranging from chronic inflammatory lung disease. There's some evidence of breast cancer, so there are numerous studies showing that, but population studies have been the strongest in my opinion.
When we look at dementia, 50% of those in Sweden and 50% of those in this country, by the time they're 85, they have dementia. Such a significant component of this appears to be from vascular disease, vascular dementia, by the data that we have on reversal of coronary artery disease, by the data that we have on the ability to reverse disease in the carotid artery that goes to the brain. So it's no great feat of imagination to say that if we really start eating in a way that is going to save our blood vessels, it can markedly diminish the likelihood of ever having the component of dementia which we call vascular dementia. There seems to be increasingly general agreement that by keeping one's weight in a normal range, by keeping normal blood pressure, and by eating the same way you would to protect your vessels, you diminish greatly the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's disease.
We can prevent, treat, and reverse the #1 killer of men and women, heart disease. We can prevent, treat, arrest, reverse type 2 diabetes and obesity and hypertension, some of the leading causes of death and disability.
these are curable conditions and that we don't need the medications, but it takes work.
Every 5 years, the U.S. government reformulates the dietary guidelines for Americans, and that in turn is the blueprint for school lunches and every other food program. The egg industry has been on a mission to say, really, we shouldn't be really limiting cholesterol in the guidelines. The meat industry is there saying, I don't think you should worry so much about fat in the guidelines. The dairy industry is saying, we need more and more and more calcium. This is not based on science. It's based on really lobbying. And they put a lot of money into it, and unfortunately, they've been rather successful.
How did our government get involved in making the recommendations they do? Why did we have a food pyramid that seemed to indicate that it was okay to consume the foods that, in fact, we ought not to be consuming? Essentially, the corporate influence, the for-profit corporate influence is severe. It operates at the policy level.
When we look at the diets that people are eating, they're actually getting 2 times, maybe 3 times the protein their body actually needs. And when you overdo it with protein, you get a number of problems with it. First of all, it's very hard on the kidneys. Your kidneys have to filter your blood, and they're having trouble with all those breakdown products of protein. But perhaps more importantly, along with that protein comes cholesterol and fat and contaminants, and those can really harm the body over time.
It was very frustrating this past year because the 2015 Scientific Advisory Guidelines to the USDA for their latest food guidelines strongly recommended pushing towards a plant-based diet, limiting red meat and processed meat. And unfortunately, when the final guidelines came out just a few weeks ago, they left a lot of that out. I'm sure a lot of it is the government is bowing to the interests of the beef industry over the health and death of Americans.
Agribusiness is finding ways to get people to eat more and more grain, but processed through animals, because it's more profitable than letting people eat grain themselves. I don't think we've ever invented as wasteful a system as the meat-based diet linked to factory farming. Animals, bovine, were never intended to eat grain. This diversion of food to feed is a large part of the hunger problem that is one part of the food crisis. But it's also part of the other malnutrition problem of an unbalanced diet dependent on too much meat that's been bred and produced in very, very nasty ways. What it's doing to human health, it's damaging the planet.
People, I feel that they're kind of brainwashed nowadays that we have to eat meat, that's how we get our protein, or we have to eat dairy, that's how we get our calcium. That's not true. We have so many options for plant-based nutrients. We can get protein, we can get calcium, we can get all the nutrients from a plant-based diet, and this is what we should be doing.
If you walk into any hospital in this country or any primary care office in this country, you will see people who are suffering from diet and lifestyle related diseases. Most of the physicians that I know, even if they have no interest in diet and lifestyle, they know that many of the problems they see and treat every day are due to the foods their patients are eating or are not eating, or the activity and lifestyle that they lead.
The concept to get clear to America, to the press, and to the public is, if you're taking a medication, is it possible for you to change your behavior such that you don't need that medication and you'll be disease-free?
We put a person on pills not for 2 weeks to knock out a pneumonia. We put them on drugs for life to control their cholesterol or control their blood pressure.
Chronic disease drugs are the cash cow of the pharmaceutical industry.
You take one pill for high blood pressure, one pill for diabetes, but if you go on a whole food plant-based diet, that covers all of those conditions.
It's not like a 10-day antibiotic course. You take these drugs forever, and in fact, something like blood pressure drugs, often you're on 2, 3, 4, 5 different classes of drugs every day for the rest of your life. That's why there's so much money in this. So that's why you open up any medical journal today, and most of the articles are about pills and procedures. Why? Because that's where the money for the research came from.
Right now, we are trying to develop pills and procedures which will allow people to continue to eat the same type of nutrition that is causing the diseases, rather than just the most ridiculously simplistic and effective approach, which is to change the lifestyle.
Chronic disease is not just a cash cow for the pharmaceutical industry, but for doctors as well. They get paid to sit down and write somebody a script, and so what do? You want to put your kids through college, you write somebody a script. The number one reason people go to primary care physicians, actually, is blood pressure checks. Doctors get paid. The easiest doctor visit there is. They come, you tweak their medication, you check their blood pressure, right? And so your doctor's next BMW is based on blood pressure checks.
To cure 95% of diabetes, 95% of high blood pressure, 95% of high cholesterol, 95% of high triglycerides, coronary artery disease, of heart attack, stroke. All those conditions are virtually entirely preventable with diet and lifestyle changes in and of themselves.
We're focused on treating diseases after it's too late, when they already occur, and we're trying to lessen the symptoms by taking drugs without removing the cause.
The promotional efforts of people to make money from quick foods, fast foods, high sugar food, the group that's paying the highest price are our children. So we're seeing phenomenal rates of obesity in childhood, diabetes, but also chronic fatigue, chronic degenerative diseases, unprecedented amounts of autoimmune disease. Children are just breaking down under the effects of this ever-increasing pressure to eat foods that are truly not healthy for them.
We put sugar in everything in our diet, and then that's one of the main things that's affecting our children. Even school lunches contain so much sugar. We don't give our children healthy options in the school cafeteria. You know, they have a choice of one fruit and one vegetable, and then all these refined packaged foods. About 80–90% of our foods contain high fructose corn syrup. That is extremely different than any sort of sugar that we will get in a whole fruit. High fructose corn syrup is causing a lot of these issues, such as dementia, obesity, and I tell every single one of my patients, do not buy anything with high fructose corn syrup in it.
Meat, dairy products, even eggs, all of these things cause inflammation and illness in our bodies.
Meat is the new tobacco, and milk is the new asbestos. And meat and dairy is killing us and our economies. Many of our greatest rivers now no longer reach the sea, sucked dry by the meat and dairy industries. It takes 1,000 liters of water to produce 1 liter of milk. These are Mad Hatter economics.
Many Americans are unaware that when they have the hamburger and the hot dog and the steak, they're contributing up to 18% of the total contribution to global warming and greenhouse gases. All these animals have a byproduct in their waste, and that's methane gas, which is now known to be up to 30 times more powerful contributing to global warming gases than what we had ever thought before. More powerful as a contributing factor to global warming than CO2.
I believe dairy products are the most dangerous. I think sugar is second in its various forms, whether it's Coca-Cola or desserts or donuts. And I think that meat is third. Then after that comes wheat and wheat-containing products, the breads, the cereals, the chips, the crackers, and then processed foods as a whole. And all the time I keep going back to an original statement that says, eat foods exactly as they grow up out of the ground and in the field.
I probably had sinus infections 3 to 4 times a year for a couple of years and would end up with extreme facial pain and congestion and just miserable. I would go see my doctor and get put on a course of antibiotics and steroids. And I was told by a number of different specialists, ear, nose, and throat specialists, I needed surgery. And it was then that I decided to change my diet. I was actually vegetarian, and I decided to give up the dairy. I haven't had a single sinus infection since I went completely vegan 7 years ago.
Got to avoid the animal products that are causing inflammation and making you sick. You've got to avoid the processed foods that are full of chemicals that actually cause an immune response in your body and inflammation within minutes after eating it. You've got to avoid processed oils, vegetable oils. All of those are actually dramatically and directly increasing inflammation in your body.
All oils, olive oil, whether it's double virgin, triple virgin, whatever, olive oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, palm oil, canola oil, these oils injure endothelial cells. It injures their ability to produce nitric oxide. This has been learned through the brachial artery tourniquet test. Milk, cream, butter, ice cream, cheese, yogurt, dairy injures the endothelial cells.
The World Health Organization has come out and said that processed red meat can cause colon cancer. I generally stick with the umbrella term of if it has a face or comes from something with a face, don't eat it.
It's not just high cholesterol, it's the toxins of our environment being concentrated in the animal foods and then those foods being taken in high quantities that has led to so many of the diseases of affluence.
Monsanto, as one of the officials of the organization said, we're here to make money. And that's not just Monsanto, that's a lot of food industries. Their job is to make money for the investor. I think that is a ridiculous sort of approach to the problem. When they're producing food, they have a reasonably good assurance that it's a good quality product. That should be the highest priority thing. And then if they can make money with that, fine and dandy. But unfortunately, it's usually the other way around. People in this sort of business are looking for opportunities to make money first priority. And then in this case, maybe letting somebody else worry about the health consequences, maybe even the public. And I think we have it upside down. That is simply upside down.
Since welcoming agro-giant Monsanto into the country in 1996, Argentina has become the world's largest soybean producer. Today, nearly 100% of its soy crop is genetically altered, with Monsanto providing much of the pesticides used in the country. But we're now learning that this overabundance of chemicals isn't just confined to Argentina's crops. A new AP report shows that they're having enormous effects on the 12 million people who live in the country's farm belt. Pesticides are showing up in the soil and drinking water, and a government report found 80% of children surveyed had traces of pesticide in their blood. As a result, people are becoming very sick. In Santa Fe, Argentina, cancer rates are 2 times to 4 times higher than the national average. And in another province called Chaco, birth defects have quadrupled.
GMO presents a huge problem. When I look at some of the results in Argentina, what we see is women living around where they're growing the GMO crops have 100 times more spontaneous abortions and have 5 times more children being born with congenital defects. You're changing your genetic.
Pay close attention to what you are about to see. These rats have been fed with transgenic corn during their entire life cycle. The tumors they suffer from are enormous. The study that revealed the effect of the GMOs on the health of these rats has just been completed. It lasted for 2 years.
We spent over a year trying to obtain transgenic corn because no GMO manufacturers were willing to provide them. This is because Monsanto requires contracts to be signed stipulating that the seeds must not be used for testing. We wanted our study to be independent.
Every rat was dissected to identify the way each diet, GMO and Roundup on its own, had acted on the metabolism of each animal, focusing on the development rate of the tumors that only start to manifest themselves after the initial 3-month period.
94% of them take effect in the mammary glands, which would equate to breast cancer in a woman. We are faced with renal tumors for the males. Some males also suffer from mammary tumors.
One could have thought that the main cause of death was coming from the pesticide added to the corn. But what the study highlighted, and this for the first time ever, is the fact that the transgenesis itself could have killed the rats. What this means is that just by interfering with the genome of the plant in order to modify it, we are faced with repercussions that no one could have anticipated. This is enough to make us reconsider all the scientific precepts that led to the creation of GMOs.
This is the GMO that is being eaten by the Americans, but also the GMO that has been approved for importation by European agencies, and that contaminates our food.
If I eat that genetically modified food, will that hurt me? Here's the person who has to worry, not the vegetarian. Because if you're eating soy products or corn, as long as you're getting organic corn or organic soy, by law it can't be GMO. The person who has to worry is the person eating chicken or beef or pork, because all of their lives these animals are being fed GMO corn, GMO soy. They have no way of knowing, the customer has no way of knowing what the animals have been fed. But the great majority of these GMO products are served to animals, and that's what meat eaters are eating. You want to avoid GMO? The idea is get to a plant-based diet, read the labels, and you won't go wrong.
What's remarkable to me is that it's the same diet. It's not like there's a heart-healthy diet and then a different diet if you care about brain health and a liver health. No, a kidney-healthy diet is a brain-healthy diet, is a heart-healthy diet, is a body-healthy diet, and that's a diet centered around whole, healthy plant foods. So the same diet that's been shown in a randomized clinical trial to improve mood, lower depression, anxiety, stress. The only dietary intervention proven in a randomized controlled trial to improve mood was a plant-based diet. Same thing. So, this is not cherry picking. There's only one cherry, right? I mean, there's only one diet that's ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients. That's a plant-based diet. If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse our number one killer, shouldn't that be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that can